Well, folks, you know how Trump said that, like, oh, we can't release any more funds for SNAP because it's illegal? Well, two judges have just ruled that, nope, they are lying about that. They can release the funds. In fact, they're demanding that they release the funds, regardless of whether the government is shut down or not. The other thing that's funny about them saying they can't release the funds is that the Trump administration did this during their first term in 2019. They released the emergency funds from USDA to keep SNAP benefits going. So they just decided that they were going to try to make sure that people starved in order to get Democrats back to the table to make sure that Democrats folded on Republicans taking more health care away from people. So this is the Republican position. We want to take health care away from people and we want to take SNAP benefits away from people. All because they gave billionaires a tax break. Imagine that. They're taking health care away from people. They're taking food away from children, and poor and working class Americans so that they could give billionaires more money that they could never spend in their lifetime. These people are cruel. They're inhumane. They don't care about anybody other than their millionaire and billionaire friends. And we're seeing it. They want to take health care away from people. They want to take food away from children. They don't care. Like, Donald Trump doesn't care. He actually showed a photo today where he renovated the bathroom in the Lincoln bedroom while also saying he couldn't afford to give people SNAP benefits, but he's wasting money on that bullshit. The guy doesn't care. They don't care about anybody. And I am glad that more and more people are waking up to the reality that Donald Trump only cares about himself and nobody else.
Huge news this afternoon. Two federal judges just ruled, like minutes ago, that the Trump administration has to continue funding those SNAP benefits just hours before they were set to end. This is huge news. I can't underscore how big it is for the 40 million Americans that rely on those benefits each month to put food on their table. So basically, you had a federal judge out of Massachusetts, one out of Rhode Island, that said the administration has to continue funding the SNAP benefits. One of the judges saying there's no doubt, it is beyond argument, that irreparable harm will begin to occur if it hasn't already. Now, the big issue here is that even just a month ago, the Agriculture Department said it had $5 billion in a contingency fund that could be used for those SNAP benefits. Then they reversed course and said, no, we can't use those funds. Kind of a standoff with the Democrats over the entire federal government shutdown. Things seemed to get even more contentious when the administration found money to continue paying members of the military during the shutdown, but didn't budge on those SNAP benefits. And a lot of political experts said this was basically posturing designed to hurt the standing of Democrats with their constituents. Several states sued the federal government over this, and that's what led to the rulings today. Now, a slight difference between each judge's orders, one judge telling the government to use the contingency funds specifically immediately and report back to him on Monday about the status of that distribution. The other judge gave the government until Monday to decide how to continue paying those benefits, whether the use of contingency funds or moving other money around. It would appear the immediate order would take precedence. That remains to be seen, though, but needless to say, this is a
Okay, so here is the good news and the bad news, and also the completely insane news on SNAP. So the good news is that not one, but two federal judges have ordered the Trump administration to pay SNAP benefits out of the contingency fund that I told you about a few days ago. The judge more or less said in both cases, like, that's exactly what this money is for. So yes, of course you should spend it because otherwise people will starve, which the Trump administration doesn't seem to think is that big of a deal, but everybody else understands is a 5-alarm fire. Now, the Trump administration, of course, had said we can't spend those emergency funds because we might need them for a hurricane. I'm not joking. That's what they said. We might need them for a hurricane, even though there are natural disasters all around the country that the Trump administration has withheld funding for months and months now because those states voted for Kamala Harris instead of Trump. But now suddenly they have a huge urgency. In fact, look at this quote. As a response to today's rulings by Kevin Hassett, he directs the National Economic Council, very far right. He's an ally of Trump. His response was, we're about to use emergency funds from the Department of Agriculture because of a liberal judge ruling that we disagree with. And he said doing so would mean we don't have our emergency funds in case we have a hurricane or we have an emergency, a food emergency, What? So that's the bad news, that MAGAs are going to say that this is not a fair or a just ruling, not a ruling they like, but that a quote-unquote liberal judge made this decision. The big question, though, and the really crazy thing, is that we still don't know, and every article about this has indicated, that we're waiting to find out whether or not the Trump administration will appeal. I want you to take that in for 1 second. We are waiting to find out whether the Trump administration will appeal releasing funds that they first said were illegal to release. Their hands were tied. They couldn't. Now 2 judges have ordered them to. And we're waiting to find out whether they'll appeal, and you know they will, because they don't want to give that food to hungry children that badly. Why? Because then they can't win their fight with Democrats to take away our health care. That's what this is about. And I'll say it again. They would rather starve children than give Americans affordable health care. Or to be even more clear, they would rather starve children than make billionaires part with 1 extra penny of their money. That's today's Republican Party under Donald Trump. And that, my friends, is the real emergency.
We have massive breaking news right now because literally minutes ago, a federal judge in Rhode Island ruled that the Trump administration must pay out SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans, at least partially, heading into November. A stunning ruling by Judge John McConnell from the bench in Rhode Island. But that's not the only case. Another judge in Massachusetts minutes ago also determined that the Trump administration's plan to block SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans was likely unlawful. 2 separate judges in 2 separate states in the same, literally same 10-minute period in the past 5 minutes issued separate orders. And I want to break both of them down for you and what this means for SNAP heading into November. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to spread the word. I'm getting you this news first as it breaks. The first is Judge John McConnell in Rhode Island. Judge McConnell ruled that the Trump administration is unlawfully withholding contingency funds that were appropriated by Congress to SNAP programs. It's about $5.5 billion worth of contingency funding. This funding must be used to pay SNAP benefits. Now let's talk about what that means. To pay SNAP for about a month, you need about $9 billion. $5.5 billion is not the full 9, but it'll get you close. It'll be enough to pay out 3 weeks worth of SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans who will lose the right to get SNAP and food assistance tomorrow because of the ongoing government shutdown. And so this is a temporary fix, but it's a significant one nonetheless. It is a significant one nonetheless. Now, the second judge essentially ruled that we're not going to issue a temporary restraining order just yet. I'm going to give you until Monday, but essentially, Donald Trump, your interpretation of the law is incorrect. So that's the second judge's ruling. But Judge McConnell says, Trump, you have to pay out SNAP benefits. You have to do it. So at least partially. So 42 million Americans, as long as this ruling holds, you're going to get some type of SNAP benefits. That is significant, and that is the top line ruling here. Now, the second judge, her name is Judge Talwani. She ruled also just minutes ago that the Trump administration plan to shut down SNAP is likely unlawful. So let's look at this ruling together because I think it's important that you guys know it fully. So she is her name is Judge Talwani. She's an Obama appointee. She writes, pending before the court is plaintiff's motion for a temporary restraining order seeking to enjoin on an emergency basis defendant's November 1, 2025 suspension of benefits under the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. For the reasons stated below, plaintiffs have standing to bring this action and are likely to succeed on their claim that defendant's suspension of SNAP benefits is unlawful, where the suspension of benefits rested on an erroneous construction of the relevant statutory provisions. The court will allow defendants to consider whether they will authorize at least reduced SNAP benefits for November and report back to the court no later than Monday, November 3rd, 2025. Now, she goes through how since 1964, when SNAP was first established, it was known to serve as a, quote, supplemental nutrition program to permit low-income households to obtain a more nutritious diet through normal channels of trade by increasing food purchasing power for all eligible households who apply for participation. Congress appropriates funds for SNAP benefits each year. The annual appropriation consists mostly of one-year base funds and sets aside a portion of the appropriation as 3-year money for contingency funds. The United States Department of Agriculture administers SNAP at the federal level, but relies on state agencies to implement SNAP locally by processing applications, certifying eligible households, and calculating the amount of benefits for each household in accordance with applicable laws and guidance. SNAP requires, as she notes, approximately $8.6 billion of funding per month, of which $8.2 billion SNAP benefits directly and about $450 million covers administrative fees. Now, the present dispute was whether or not those contingency funds could be used to cover at least part of that $8.6 billion bill that SNAP has to be covered every single month. And while here, the judge says yes. Both judges said yes. And I'm reading Judge Talwani's decision today, even though she did not go as far as Judge McConnell, but ultimately the ruling is what it is. And the reason why I'm reading Judge Talwani's decision is because she actually issued it. This went to my inbox, whereas Judge McConnell read his decision from the bench. So we don't have his decision in print. Judge Talwani writes that the plaintiffs have a likelihood of success on the merits of their claim under the Administrative Procedures Act because defendants' suspension of SNAP benefits is contrary to law. At core, defendants' conclusion that USDA is statutorily prohibited from funding SNAP because Congress has not enacted new appropriations for the current fiscal year is erroneous. To the contrary, defendants are statutorily mandated to use the previously appropriated SNAP contingency reserve when necessary, and also have discretion to use other previously appropriated funds as detailed below. When Congress established the program in 1964, it did so in part to utilize the nation's food supply to the maximum extent practicable to safeguard the health and well-being of the nation's population and raise levels of nutrition among low-income households. Pursuant to the Food and Nutrition Act of 2008, assistance under SNAP shall be furnished to all eligible households, subject to the availability of appropriated funds. As both parties acknowledge, Congress has not yet appropriated new funds for SNAP for the fiscal year 2026. But Congress took steps to protect against deprivation of SNAP assistance in prior years. And right now, while defendants argue that there is no available money in the annual account, under defendant statutory construction, the use of separately appropriated contingent reserve to fund SNAP benefits is somehow predicated on Congress's annual appropriation of funds to the SNAP program, but Congress placed no such restriction in the 2024 Consolidated Appropriations Act. And so she concludes by saying, quote, the motion for temporary restraining order remains under advisement. No later by Monday, November 3rd, defendants shall advise the court whether they will authorize at least reduced SNAP benefits for November, and if so, their timeline for determining whether to authorize only reduce SNAP benefits using the contingency funds or to authorize full SNAP benefits using both the contingency funds and additional funds. So that's her ruling, which essentially says, we're not going to order you to do it just yet, but what you're doing is unlawful, Trump. And if you don't let us know by Monday, then we're going to make sure then we're going to follow up. But another judge, essentially Judge McConnell, said, we're going to go one step further. You must go forward. You must use emergency funds. Judge McConnell did that in Rhode Island. So he issued a temporary restraining order from the bench. He says that the program must be funded using the contingency funds and asked for an update on progress by Monday. So multiple judges coming to the same conclusion, but ultimately Trump has to pay out these funds, and they want an update by Monday. We'll see what happens next. We'll see whether they appeal. As always, you're getting the news first from me, so like, comment, share, and subscribe to support my work. I will not stop, not today, not ever, and I'll see you soon for another update, so stay tuned.
Hey everybody, welcome to the neighborhood. Let's get into it and talk about SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans and what a judge just handed down to the Trump administration. Okay, so 2 federal judges today have ruled that supplemental nutrition assistance programs serving about 42 million Americans cannot be cut off as part of the shutdown mess. How about that? Court documents ordered the U.S. Department of Agriculture to tap into its contingency reserve, about $5 to $6 billion, and ensure November benefits are issued without interruption. Now, These injunctions came before USDA could suspend benefit payments. The move was declared likely unlawful under the Food and Nutrition Act, which guarantees payments to eligible households. Immediately relief for millions is what we need to be concerned with. Roughly 1 in 8 Americans rely on SNAP. Okay, halting payments, even for a single month, would have knocked complete households, retailers, and state agencies off kilter. Okay, remember we did a whole talk about this and how this isn't just about SNAP benefits and people receiving it. It's the stores, it's the corner stores. That's the only place to get food in communities. It's the employees, it's the truckers, it's the wholesalers. It's an entire ecosystem, right? And so without those SNAP benefits going out, it knocks all of that off. It's a legal precedent. Here's the next thing. The ruling reinforces that the administration cannot unilaterally cut aid mandated under federal law, even in a shutdown. Budget pressure is ahead. While this win keeps November payments safe, the contingency fund is not going to cover weeks or months of payments without congressional action. Okay, so this is just a band-aid, folks. That's it. So the courts keep going clock is absolutely ticking. Now, here's something else. For states, more than 24 attorney generals and governors had sued, calling USDA's threatening halt illegal withholding of benefits. These allies now have the courts on their side. Now, low-income families were definitely going to feel it. This moment means food security stress has been delayed for now, perhaps avoided, giving families breathing room to get through the shutdown. Now, for the administration, here's the thing. USDA must now decide whether to fully use the contingencies fund, scale back payouts, or seek a settlement. They've signaled that withdrawing the full pot nationwide could be disastrous. Now, for those of you all who are the people in the neighborhood of Brownstone Worldwide, we're going to continue to keep watching this for you guys and how states are actually implementing payments in the coming days, what they're going to be doing, how some states are already setting up those contingency plans, and how people in particular neighborhoods around the nation are literally setting up food banks and other things to prepare for this. So here's the thing. The bottom line is the court has forced the federal government's hand for now. SNAP benefits remain live for November, and many Americans just got a little bit of a lifeline just for a little while, y'all. But the war is not over, and I need you all to understand that, okay? The reason why I say that is the contingency fund is only going to buy time. That's it. What happens next depends on political action and government follow through. Listen, let me tell y'all something. Keep your head on a swivel. When you do get your benefits this month coming up in November, do something with them. Get you some stuff and put it aside if you need to. We all know how to do this. We've had to do it. So what I will say to you is, for more news and information that you can always use, head over to brownstoneworldwide.com, Cityscape Radio, and you guessed it, Brownstone Living Magazine. We'll see you around.
So I just wanted to come to you with a little bit of breaking news. A federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from not funding SNAP next week. The Trump administration has until Monday to respond to the federal judge as to how they plan on distributing the funds. It is not up to the White House to decide what they fund and what they do not fund. There is a federal law that was put in place during the Obama administration, which prevents these programs that are so critical to our citizens from being defunded during times like this. Now, will they actually adhere to this court decision? We don't know, because it doesn't seem like they actually follow court orders. Interested to see how this pans out. In the meantime, I am so very proud of this community. We've currently raised over $1,200 for the Second Harvest Food Bank here in Central Florida. Every $10 raised equals 40 meals. You guys are killing it, and I'm so proud of you. Anywho, I hope that you have a happy Halloween.
U.S. District Judge John J. McConnell Jr. just saved millions of men, women, and children from starving in the United States of America by ruling that the Trump administration's attempt to suspend SNAP benefits is unlawful. And he has now ordered the Trump administration to use the SNAP contingency fund immediately to make sure that people get their SNAP benefits on November 1st. How embarrassing for this administration after spending the past 5 weeks blaming Democrats for not only the government shutdown, but their inability to provide SNAP benefits. They were like, the Democrats are stopping us from providing this benefit. Then why did a judge just have to force you to use the contingency fund, which tells everyone that you could have always used it? When has Trump ever cared about the law? Please tell me. So if using the contingency fund was against the law, he would have already used it because he likes breaking the law. But clearly not using the contingency fund at this time when people are about to go hungry is unlawful. And so I'll just read a direct quote from our hero, U.S. District Judge John J. McConnell. The court is orally at this time ordering that USDA must distribute the contingency money timely or as soon as possible for the November 1st payments to be made, said U.S. District Judge John J. McConnell Jr. A lot of J's. After an hour-long emergency hearing, the judge ruled that the suspension of SNAP funding is arbitrary and likely to cause irreparable harm, citing the terror felt by Americans who are scrambling to meet their basic nutritional needs. Well, there you have it, folks. Once again, good has triumphed over evil for now. You know they're going to come back and then they're probably going to try to fire that judge or send him to jail. How dare you? How dare you try to help Americans eat?
So a federal judge has ordered that Donald Trump and the Trump administration abide by a contingency order that was placed decades ago on SNAP benefits, meaning if there is a government shutdown, that this shutdown will not affect those who are receiving food assistance here in the United States of America. So this federal judge said, hey, you know what? Does not matter that there is a shutdown currently in place in the United States. You do not put food above American people's heads. Plain and simple. You have to supply that which is needed for Americans or just people in general to survive. Let me know your thoughts in the comments over this way, because if we look back at Donald Trump's last terms, these were the executive orders that, federal judges placed on Donald Trump and the Trump administration back then. These are the orders that they abided by, and these are the orders they said no to. Since Donald Trump has taken office this time, they have completely ignored over 34% of executive orders that come through the courts from these federal judges. Let me know your thoughts in the comments over this way. Is this going to be another thing that Donald Trump and the Trump administration is going to ignore completely? Also, there are a lot of Republicans coming out